Hey, welcome to the funny farm. City slicker, challenges, and surprises. The realities of moving from a city life to a country life. What might it really be like? Welcome to Goose Pond Hideout, and I'm Rob. So I thought today, with all the wonderful things that are going on in the world, that I'd talk a little bit about city slickers, moving from the city out to the country, and what you might be faced with. What challenges and surprises might you run into? What are the realities of doing it? And what got me thinking about this today, again, this morning while I was drinking my coffee and that, and my mind starts wandering around about what kinds of things I can be sharing with you, is I started thinking about that movie Funny Farm with Chevy Chase. And it came out, I think, in the late 80s. And if you're not familiar with the movie, obviously Chevy Chase is a funny guy, a comedian. He did lots of crazy things in his lifetime. And what the gist of the movie, why I got thinking about, what I can share with you is, they live in New York City, him and his wife, and he decides, he wants to write a novel. So he's got he's having trouble coming up with his thoughts or ideas or whatever. And he decides, they move to a little rinky-dink town, a country home I believe it's in Vermont. They like using Vermont for their settings for these kinds of movies. And, all the townspeople are like all basically nuts. They all have idiosyncrasies, all kinds of things wrong with them. And he's trying to write his novel, and he's running into all kinds of trouble with the townspeople. And his dog is digging in the garden, and they dig up a coffin, and he's got to deal with getting rid of the coffin, and they say it's his responsibility because anything that's on the property belongs to you when you buy it. And the mailman is a drunk, which seems to be a common theme for rural towns in New England. And, the gist of all of that is, and things like that we've learned along our journey is, it's something like, you can say, God laughs, make your plans in pencil. And the lesson to be learned here is when you decide to move from the city out to the country, that the realities and the challenges are going to be significant if you don't have any country experience. And for example, we didn't even have a mailbox on this property when we moved here. There was no mail service to the property, and it took a long time for us to get that straightened out, months and months, before we got them to realize that we were living here. And electricity might be an issue, and water might be an issue, and basically all the things that you take for granted when you live in the city, that they're just there. Even run into town, like you don't just run out for a pizza here. If you decide you're hungry at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you better hope that you have something available in the house, because the closest store might be 25 miles away, and they might not even be open, late at night. That was another thing that we learned, is these small towns especially up in New England, they close up shop at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you need something in the evening, you're out of luck. And, so make your plans in pencil. be aware of the realities. It's going to be a real learning curve. And one of my favorite sayings is, experience is a hard teacher because she gives the exam first and then the lesson after. So you're going to have to, you're going to learn a lot of things the hard way. And, just, I don't know if you can really see it or not, but I got big scrapes on my arms here, where the other day I was trimming some tree branches and one was stuck. So I'm cutting it real careful with the chainsaw up like this. And when I finally cut through the branch, it came crashing down, and it hit my arm, and I was bleeding like a stuck pig there for a while. So, be making your plans with pencil, be thinking about, how you're going to get along with people that have different values than you. Excuse me. And the other thing with moving to the country, the other point that I want to make for you is, don't try to do too much too quick. And, like Chevy Chase wanted to be the writer and wanted to write the novel, and he's dealing with all the crazy local town folks. And his wife ends up writing a children's book, and she becomes the successful author. So, his plans when he left New York and moved to Vermont was to be a novel writer, and it ends up that his wife is the book writer, a children's book, but she writes the book and becomes successful. And he ends up, like being becomes one of the locals in the town, and he's like the sportscaster for the, the local teams and things like that, writing for the little local newspaper. They had a newspaper back then. It was the 80s. And before digital days. But the other thing that you want to be thinking about is, don't be trying to do too much too quick. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. The big mistakes are waiting too long to do what you want to do, procrastinating, putting things off until the pain is so significant that you finally make the change. And like he made the change of moving from New York City to Vermont, is the number one mistake, again, is people, I don't want you to wait too long to make the change. The second thing is unreal expectations of what, the fantasy versus the reality of what it's really going to be like when you get moved to the country, and the things that you have to deal with in the country, like getting your mail and getting electricity, and wondering if your well's going to run dry when you try to do 3 loads of laundry and take a shower all at the same time. And, heating your house with firewood. You can see behind me, I've got some, getting the wood stacked up and ready for the winter that's coming around the corner. That's why I got I don't really need it right now. It was like 54 early this morning, and it's in the upper 60s now. So I don't really need the flannel shirt, but I thought it would help make the point of it's fall and it's cooling off here. So that's the second point then, is the unreal expectations. And the third point then is trying to do too much too soon. And when we moved here to the homestead, we got chickens right away, and we wanted to get goats because we wanted goat milk, and my wife was going to make soaps, and we were going to sell the soaps and sell the milk and have the milk to drink, and we're going to be self-sufficient with goat products. And we didn't have any place to put the goats. The only fencing we had on the property was barbed wire fence, like T-posts, the green metal T-posts, and then 3 or 4 strands of barbed wire fence around the property. We didn't have the necessary fencing. We didn't have a shelter for them. So, we didn't get them right away. And thankfully, there weren't any goats available, like that just sort of, like they kind of fall into your lap, like somebody down the road passes away, or the kids go off to college or whatever, and it's like, here, take our goats, we want to get rid of them. So thankfully that didn't happen, because now at this point, looking back in time, we're really glad that we didn't get goats because of the amount of work that they are. And at this point in our life, we're trying to tone down the things that we have to do and have to take care of. So we're really glad that we put off getting goats, because now we're glad that we don't have the goats. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking about, is the realities of what it's like to move, not having unrealistic expectations, and not jumping into too many things right away at once. Give yourself a chance to get used to living in the country. The place that you think might be perfect for your garden might not get enough sun, or it might flood in the spring and it's a muddy mess, or there might be a better spot. So give yourself a little bit of time to get used to living in the country before you start getting animals and start tearing out trees and start rotor-tilling up a garden and all those kinds of things. Don't jump in too quick. And check out the movie Funny Farm with Chevy Chase. He's a real funny guy, and it might motivate you to give up being a city slicker with everything available to you, because who knows, it kind of seems like shortages, bread lines, no electricity, water issues. New York City, I'm kind of looking like you might be in trouble here pretty soon down the road with what's going on with the politics there. So you might want to be thinking about getting out of that city life and moving up to Maine or New Hampshire or Vermont, or maybe moving down south to somewhere like Tennessee or something like that, North Carolina in the mountains, Kentucky. Depending on how much winter you want to have. If you want to still have some winter, or if you're ready to give up the winter life, then no more ice fishing. So be thinking about all that. And the thing is, it's all about your freedom and enjoying life while you can. We only get so many trips around the sun on this rock, and I'm about to have a birthday in a couple weeks here, so I know what that's like.